What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Jay, and welcome back to Building a Holistic Life, Chapter 3, or 2.5, where we dive into the last 3 ultimate desires. Last week, we started with the first 3, so wealth, stability, and success. And today, we're going to dive into status, loving companionship, and altruism. And so you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned, and let's dive into it. All right, so last week we finished off by talking about success, and one of the things that comes along with success a lot of the times is status. But so people who are driven by status, whose ultimate desire is to have some sort of popularity, are those people who want to be remembered. They want to be perceived as being a good person or having done something exceptional or interesting. Status and success-driven people are often very hard to distinguish because of the fact that status can be a very superficial desire, and so they'll often kind of try and cover that up with some sort of outward appearance that they're driven by success, that they're driven by being successful at whatever they are. The way you tell these people apart is really about how they talk, and then more subtly, at least with this one, oftentimes their body language or things that are unrelated to their job. Okay, so if success is driven by work, then pay attention to the way they speak around that, or the way that you think around things that are not related to your job. Okay, if you want to be popular and known within your community, and you also want that kind of status symbol job, then there's a strong likelihood that those two things are related and not as different as you may think. Now, status to me is probably the ultimate desire that is the most superficial. I mean, probably that makes sense, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad thing. However, I do suggest that if this is kind of your current mindset, to potentially start investigating some of the other desires that we've talked about. And the reason for that is because people with that desire achieve happiness through other people's opinion. They form their self-worth based on what other people think and say about them. And that is a very fleeting feeling where it always needs to be topped up. To see that notification that says your post was liked or your picture was liked or someone commented, and it gives us happiness, it gives us joy, but how quickly does that joy dissipate? And I think that's where the problem lies, is this idea that you're relying on other people to actually bring you that happiness. With any of the other ultimate desires that we talked about, there's a sense of comfort knowing we're attaining that goal. Whereas with this, that goal keeps moving. That goal is never consistent. And so specifically with status, I think it's important, while it is going to be part of everybody's life, that it probably shouldn't be the one thing that you hold above everything else, because in the long run, if our goal is to build a happy life, then there is so much potential for that to crumble out from underneath you and you end up in a worse place. While it is important and it can very much be something you're driven to achieve, I do not think it should be the primary thing. For example, an easy way to kind of switch off of this, if right now you're trying to be a social media model and you're driven by the number of likes or the number of comments or maybe the number of sponsorships that you get, then why not look at it like, well, I want to do this because I want to help young girls feel better about themselves, or I want to help more people get in shape, or I want to provide some sort of moment of happiness in people's lives through a joke or whatever, okay? Moving away from the need of other people's attention to focusing on the good that you provide will not only probably make you make better content, but actually make you feel better about what it is that you're doing. So go out and do good for the other people without actually necessarily asking for anything in return. What I want to end on, because the next ultimate desire actually ties in really well with that concept of do without asking. A lot of actual experts who talk about social media influence or status in general talk about learning to love the process. And that's really what I want to have you guys focus on. It's this idea that move away from your ultimate desire being the likes and rather focus on the journey and the goal of achieving success in whatever field that may be. So let's jump into the fifth ultimate desire, which is altruism. Now, if you have never taken an ecology class or have never heard of the word altruism and think I'm off my rocker, what it actually means, or rather, I'll give you an example to help kind of describe what it is. And if you think about species like ants or species like bees, where everyone in the colony actually helps one individual, in this case the queen, in order to reproduce, they're actually giving up a lot of their own time, life, and biological quest. In the world, animals have two goals, and that is to survive and to make babies. And in these specific species, 99% of individuals don't fulfill that second one. They don't actually reproduce. Instead, they invest all their time into actually helping one individual produce as many offspring as possible. And so it's this concept of giving up some of yourself to benefit other people around you. Now, I think altruism is probably one of the purest ultimate desires. I don't think it's hugely prevalent in our society, but one could hope that one day it might be. So it's this idea of doing something for others without asking for anything in return. So like many other things, you can identify this either in yourself or in other people by really listening to the conversation, right? If people are saying they want to do things to be a good person or to help somebody out, a lot of times people who are volunteering or who are donating are people who actually value this altruism. It might not be their ultimate desire, but it's definitely up there. So some people will choose career paths that are not glamorous, that are not fancy. Status for them is probably at the bottom of the list, and altruism is probably high up at the top. But things like nurses or paramedics, these are people who don't get the recognition of other people in similar fields, i.e. doctors. Again, I'm trashing on the doctors. But they actually do a lot more good for people. What I mean by that is when you compare how many people these people touch in their day-to-day life in the sense of help out or do things for, they end up actually providing a lot more service and a lot more help and give more of themselves for others than I think anything else in the world. Your career path is a great way to actually influence your altruism or reach the point where you can really focus on that goal. Now, there are other things you can do, whether that's, like I said, volunteering or donating or even participating in kind of community outreach or things of that nature where you actually can go out and help people. Then all of that will do you a lot of good inside and you'll end up feeling a lot better for it. True altruism is found in people who find happiness and satisfaction in actually seeing kind of the improvement in someone else's life based on their work. So I do want to touch on this briefly, and that's this idea that altruism and status are often very polar opposites, very similarly to the way that risk-taking and stability are polar opposites. A lot of people will hide that kind of desire for status or popularity through kind of more pure holistic means. Now, if status is your thing, then own it and be real. If altruism is your thing, then absolutely thank you very much, first and foremost, and do as much as you can to help the other people, and in return, you will end up feeling so much better. So the last ultimate desire that I want to talk about is love and family. We talked about it a lot last week, so I'm just going to give kind of a brief overview, but obviously, if love is your ultimate desire, then companionship is the one thing you search for. And I think this is the one that a lot of people actually have. They really are focused on kind of finding that partner and developing that life and that relationship together. Now, this is one of those desires that's actually probably harder to achieve because of the fact that it's not solely based on your feelings and your work. Okay, there's another person involved, and so regardless of how hard you try, most of the time you can't change other people's minds, and regardless of how much you want something, if that other person doesn't want that same thing, it's just not gonna happen. That being said, there are a bunch of different things that you can do to actually help you get there. And I think it does bother me a little bit when people talk about how it's just like, it's not fair, it doesn't work, or nobody ever likes me. And it's like, well, how many times have you put yourself out there and have you tried? And the answer is probably not that often. Don't be afraid to reach out. This goes for guys or girls. Reach out people. If you're interested in someone, go talk to them. It doesn't even have to be about a lot. You can just walk up and say hi and then see where the conversation goes from there. Now, preferably you would be in a situation that makes sense, and you probably shouldn't just walk up to a stranger, say hi, and stand there awkwardly. But even that is better than doing nothing, because at least you learn what works and what doesn't through trial and error. And the last thing I want to talk about is invest cautiously. Now, one of my best friends growing up, kind of like a mentor, told me that always keep a glove up. And this concept is actually very interesting to me, because it's this idea that regardless of what you see happening or feel happening, you always need to end up protecting yourself. Okay? Take your time, go slow, invest in people. Don't be afraid to go for it. However, always do so holding a little bit back. Okay? Dating is like science. Every interaction with a person that you're interested in is a data point. And it's only after a whole bunch of data points are collected that you can actually see what's going on. So don't make snap judgments. Don't go from 0 to 100 necessarily overnight. Take your time to actually get to know that person, collect as much data as you can, and then evaluate whether or not you think it's proper. Because the truth is, if love is your ultimate desire, you're looking for a person that you can actually connect with, interact with, be happy with, and build with in the long run. And the only way to do that is to actually collect information about whether or not you are compatible. Keep in mind that relationships are work. Everything is easy when you're 2 months in and everything is fresh and exciting and new. It's a lot harder when you're 2 years in, or 10 years in, right? Or 20 years in. So you always need to be evolving, you always need to be communicating and looking at ways of how to progress forward. As much as we talk about loving the process or loving the journey rather than the destination, it is very true. You can love the journey of finding that person, but that isn't actually the destination. You then have another journey to take with that person, and you can love that journey as well. So don't let it stagnate, don't let it be consistent. Find ways of shaking it up, and you will be much happier in the long run. And so with that, I'm going to say a big thank you again for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, if you felt it was helpful. If you want to know more about this kind of journey towards a holistic life, if you want to learn about all the different other aspects, as well as potentially some different systems in order to achieve those goals, you definitely want to stay in contact, definitely want to subscribe. As always, you can always follow me on Instagram. You can also reach out to me, whether that's directly here on YouTube in the comments or on Instagram via direct message. I answer pretty much everyone who asks a question. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.